What is the craziest and most unforgettable news story? Well, 9/11 is obvious, but also Obama addressing the nation that Osama bin Laden was killed. It was the same year, 2011, that my sister and Bill had gotten married and everyone was already over at their house that night because we were watching the Cardinals baseball game. Columbine happened my senior year of high school and it was such a stunning event at the time. The sad reality is that you need a bigger body count for people to remember you these days. That hits really close to home. This only happened a couple of years ago, but at our school district someone was shot 8 times. I expected the news to be all over this story since it was what I was used to with school shootings. When I got home there was nothing on national news, maybe one segment a week on the statewide news. I was shocked that people could brush over something like that. The Boston bombing. I came home from school that day and saw it on my TV. I'm Canadian, but our city has a close relationship and shared culture with Boston historically. That whole day was dark for everyone as the number of victims rolled in. I remember when they caught the second bomber that night with a thermal camera. Interesting how the world is captivated by certain events. Trump telling people to inject themselves with bleach. Edit. What the duck have I started? Okay, I'm no Trump supporter, but out of all the completely ridiculous and moronic things he has said, he never suggested people inject themselves with bleach. He said they were going to look into injecting disinfectant, which is still incredibly fucking ridiculous, but it's not the same as suggesting people start injecting themselves with bleach. People are just taking this and running with it when it's not necessary. You have so many actual stupid things he has said to work with. I had a neighbor named Jeff. He was an absolute asshole. He left his dog in the snow, set off fireworks near my baby sister's window, yelled every freaking football game, then yells cop callers, I better shut my ass up unless I want the cops here, haha, at us as we're coming home. But the city told his mom, who legally owned his house, and she kicked him out and sold the land to the sanitation district, and Jeff moved to another town. 1 month later his pit bull, the one he leaves in the snow, nearly killed him and his equally as an asshole girlfriend and rendered them crippled. Why did the pit bull do it? He hit it. If you don't believe me, look up Jeff Studer pit bull attack. The Challenger disaster is probably the first time I really paid attention to the news. I was 7 at the time. I'd always been interested in space, but this really sparked my interest and now it's a lifelong passion. So some good came of that horrible tragedy. The other one that springs to mind is Lockerbie via this news flash. We're so used to breaking news headlines now, but back then a news flash was very rarely used and only for the most serious events. The news story I saw over 20 years ago on a local news show, when they ran footage of a body bag being slid into an ambulance. Inside that bag was a close family friend, someone who was like a brother to me. The image is burned in my brain. I never wanted to see that and I won't ever forget it. When I was in 6th grade, 1986, they rolled the TV into the classroom, always a special day, so we could watch Krista McAuliffe, a teacher, be launched into space aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger. This was just the beginning of a longer curriculum program, in which McAuliffe would instruct the United States, and potentially, the world's, children on various space-related topics while aboard the Challenger, NASA's Teacher in Space project. We watched the launch live. Shortly after liftoff, there was an equipment failure and the Challenger was destroyed. There were no survivors. Shortly thereafter, NASA determined that space travel was too risky for civilians and discontinued the Teacher in Space program. 9/11. I was in my first year at college, originally started as a music and journalism major. I had my first class, media law and ethics, and was walking into class. My head hung low cause I had to give a presentation and wasn't prepared for it. I was also a practicing Catholic at the time, so I was praying on the way in. Please, just anything to delay my presentation. Let the others take longer, I just can't today. Yeah, then I walk in with eyes fixated on the TV as the second plane collided with the building. My professor turned to me and said, "Sorry, this takes precedence." I still hold a tremendous amount of guilt from that. Sandy Hook was just terrible. I was around the age of the kids that were killed and I lived in Connecticut, so it was very traumatic just hearing about that in the car. My family was driving down to DC that day, and on the way down we must have gotten well over 24 phone calls from relatives asking if I went to Sandy Hook and if I was okay. When I was in high school, there was a news story from Canada about a group of teenagers who broke into a house while the owners were on vacation and microwaved the house cat. I remember the news report said how the cat screamed in agony for 10 minutes before dying off. The teenagers were never named, Canadian law, and walked off with community service. I hate them to this day. I wish evil to no one else on earth, but I wish evil on them. If karma and curse are real, I hope the very worst for their lives. Hearing about the Marjory Stoneman Douglas shooting. It was Valentine's Day and I was at lunch with my friends when I was just reading the news on my phone, and then I got the notification and saw the story. It wasn't a normal Valentine's Day after that. I also remember the aftermath of the shooting and also March for Our Lives and more. A few months ago I was watching the evening news and I happened to see that the cops were looking for a friend of mine over a murder and tampering with evidence. At first I didn't think it was him, I thought that maybe it was someone with the same name. But then they showed his mugshot and yup, it was him. That's ducking crazy. I got home after a long day of testing and studying at school, so I passed out on my bed after only a few minutes. I wake up and go and Snapchat and see everyone saying the public library is on fire. So I storm outside to the living room and on the TV was news about the library fire, and then in the background you can't see it but the second floor collapsed, killing 2 of the firefighters during the fire. I was in university and watching an American TV channel, living in Canada, and on the news they said, "We are coming to you live from Port Coquitlam," which is the town I grew up in. And I was so surprised to hear the name on American TV. They had just discovered the Picton pig farmer who is Canada's worst serial killer. Could not believe that was happening in my town and that the farm was right next to where I went to high school. When I was around 10 years old, the local news ran a story about an elderly woman who had taken a long fall and hadn't made it. They showed her lying on the concrete, no warning. I was horrified and will have that image burned into my brain forever.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more HeardIt.